Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming today. We are very happy and honored to have with us two people who are here to tell you about the upcoming plenipotentiary meeting on the International Telecommunications Union. We have Undersecretary Catherine Novelli and Deputy Assistant Secretary Daniel Sepulveda. When it comes time for questions, please remember to identify yourself and your outlet just like we always do. So with that, I yield to the Undersecretary.
All right. Well, this conference, the Plenipotentiary Conference that Ambassador Sepulveda is going to represent the United States at, is a very important conference. The ITU has a little-known agency, I think, to the general public, but it has been absolutely crucial in ensuring that telecommunications as we know it today is as we know it today. And it has ensured the interconnectedness of telecommunications, and we want to make sure that its role in the Internet remains robust in ensuring that type of interconnectedness and ensuring that we are able to bring the benefits of the Internet to as many people as possible, so that broadband can be built out and so that technical assistance can be given to countries who are trying to build out their broadband. A few statistics about the Internet. I think it's self-evident that it's a vital contributor to economic growth, but it's very interesting. The Internet economy today is $4.2 trillion in the G20 alone. And developing markets are experiencing 3 times more growth in the Internet economy than developed markets. And the other things that I think are amazing on the statistics front is that there were only 16 million users of the Internet 20 years ago. Today, there are 3 billion users globally, which is about half the world's population. And we think that number is going to grow to 5 billion in 2020. So we know that as there's more people, things become more complicated. And the Internet as a diffuse and very diverse mechanism for communication also needs to have a very sophisticated mechanism for governance. And the United States has been very strong in saying that we need to not have a centralized way of governing the Internet as some governments have proposed, but instead that we really need to preserve what's called the multi-stakeholder approach to Internet governance. And that means that both technicians and NGOs and governments and businesses are all able to contribute on an equal footing to how the rules governing content and supply of that content and privacy and all of the kind of rules that sit above the actual transmission of data, that they all have a say in how those things should take place and what are the best practices. And so part of this meeting is to make sure that we keep the Internet governance based on multi-stakeholderism, and that at the same time that we ensure that the ITU plays its fundamental role in making sure that there is more connectivity for people so that they can build out more Internet and a larger economic growth for the world. We are very clear and have been clear that we don't support abandoning the multi-stakeholder system, and that we don't think that there is one body where the governance of the Internet should rest, be it the ITU or someplace else in the UN or any sort of group of governments or whatever. And so that's something that we'll be working to ensure during this meeting. But we hope that we will be able to achieve a consensus on what is the proper role of the ITU and to work constructively so that we can march forward in bringing the benefits of the Internet to as many people as possible. And turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Undersecretary. That's an excellent summary of an overview. The ITU is broken into 3 divisions. One is the ITU radio sector, which provides global allocations in the airwaves for the different uses of communications over airwaves, and that way you get the economies of scale of an international mobile platform, international satellite platforms, et cetera. The second sector is the ITU technical standards sector, and what that does is create voluntary standards that are developed by industry and government alike to connect telecommunications networks to each other. And then the third bureau is the ITU development sector, and what they do is bring best practices and information sharing to policymakers in countries in the developing world to create a legal and regulatory and policy environment that encourages investment, competition, and the deployment of networks. So the ITU plays a critical function in ensuring that the underlying infrastructure is being developed and deployed to connect people. That is its purpose, that is its utility, and we will continue to work to make sure that it can execute on that purpose and utility. It's a vital and critical function. And then we will have the larger questions and debates about the role of government relative to how people use the internet, what they say and what they do on it, and who should have oversight over those practices. And we believe that that is better left to the multi-stakeholder institutions and other mechanisms, and that to date, the very success of the internet as a global system for communications is proof of concept. Both as a matter of making sure that naming and numbering works, for example, at ICANN, that the voluntary protocols for how communication is transferred over Internet Protocol works across networks across the globe. Again, there's just a history of success there. We should show some degree of humility in the face of that success and enable its continued participation while making it more inclusive of everyone that wants to participate in it. So with that, I think we'll open it up to questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Lynn Stanton from Telecommunications
Hi,
Reports.
Lynn.
This has been an issue, of course, on the table since the WICET back in 2012. How much progress do you think you've made in bringing the message and winning allies to the U.S. position from where things stood at the Dubai WICET in 2012?
Thank you for the question. There's a very interesting conversation to have actually about how far back this conversation goes, which I would say goes back to at least to the WICES in 2003 and 2005. The last time it made news was at the WICET in 2012. And since then, we've had 2 major ITU events, the World Telecommunications Policy Forum, the World Telecommunications Development Council, both of which were consensus-based. There was no voting, there was no division of the union. So in that sense, the union itself is healthier in the wake of the WICET. But more generally, the community of people who care about these issues and have come to work together on them are working in a much more productive and collaborative way. So the biggest and most evident success of that was Net Mundial, where you had 98 countries, the vast majority of whom supported the outcome document. And that outcome document is the latest in the evolutionary process of how folks view the multi-stakeholder system and how it works. Yesterday I gave a speech at CSIS and I quoted directly from that Net Mundial document. I also quoted colleagues from around the world. Malcolm Turnbull, who is the Australian Minister of Communications, gave a great speech in Brisbane in September in which he outlined why this matters and how it's constructed. Alejandra Lagunes from Mexico at the WICES Plus 10 high-level event gave a stirring defense and speech of the multi-stakeholder system and Mexico's commitment to it. Now, if you'll remember, Mexico signed the ITRs. So where we are now is that Brazil, in the Global South, has hosted a major conference which was an exercise in the multi-stakeholder process and did so successfully. And we have the movement of not just Mexico, but a number of other countries like Nigeria, Rwanda, Kenya, and in Latin America, throughout Latin America, Colombia, Chile, and in Southeast Asia, Korea, and others who have really committed to participation in the system and are working well through it. That isn't to say that there isn't debate and discussion and deliberation, but there is a growing commitment to the idea that the multi-stakeholder process can work. It can work for everyone, and it can be inclusive, and should be. We're committed to that goal as well. Yes, sir.
Joe Marks from Politico. Has your work trying to instill the multi-stakeholder model been made more difficult by external events like Ukraine?
I don't think that external events like Ukraine have made our work more difficult. In fact, I think they've pointed out the need for more access to the internet and it's caused us to step up our game as well to talk about what really are the economic benefits, because there's we want everybody to have free access to information, and I think events like Ukraine show why that's really important, and the ability to communicate what's going on in real time. But there's also this other piece about economic benefit, and we have really, I think, stepped up our game. Ambassador Sepulveda has, all of us have, to try to communicate what that is, and to have also the domestic constituencies who are benefiting from this in other countries communicate to their own countries that they're benefiting from this and how that is the case.
And on the issue of the Snowden revelations, which has been one of the issues that's made pushing for the multi-stakeholder model more difficult, I spoke with Arne Schönbrunn, the president of the German Cybersecurity Alliance, earlier today, who has suggested that the U.S. should just get in front of this, let everything out so that trust can begin again, rather than letting sort of leak after leak come out from the intercept over time. Do you have thoughts on that?
I think that the president has been very clear about what our policy is in the wake of the Snowden revelations, and I think we are executing on that policy. Obviously, one has to balance national security concerns, but there's a robust work inside the government to make sure that we are respectful of both foreigners' privacy and privacy of our own citizens, that we have a robust process for looking at that. And so I think we are where we are at this point.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, Jason Chang from Yonhap News Agency of South Korea. To be honest, I'm not familiar with this issue, so forgive me if my
No problem.
Yeah,
Most people.
ignorance. Will there be any? Yeah, definitely. Will there be any decision at the coming meeting on the issue of governance? Will there be a vote?
It is our hope that there will not be votes. Historically, the International Telecommunications Union, like most UN agencies, works by consensus. And Korea has proposed a focus on work on connectivity, on ensuring that we focus the work of the Union on ensuring that people have access to broadband networks worldwide. We share that focus of work. We believe in that as a good and positive outcome for the Union. And the Korean government and the hosts have been exceptionally welcoming to us, and we're very grateful for that, and we look forward to a good conference.
But there have been, just while we hope there won't be any votes, there are a number of proposals that are put forward by various constituencies, some of which would suggest that the mandate of the ITU be broadened. And so I think we hope that will be clear that there is not consensus around that, and so that we will just move ahead to talk about what really is the ITU best capable of doing that's constructive in this place.
Joe Marks from Politico. Where do you expect the strongest opposition to the multi-stakeholder model to come from?
It'll come from where it's always come from predominantly from nations with authoritarian regimes, where there is an active civil society and an active industry that in this particular space. We're not surprised by proposals that will be coming from, particularly from the Arab region and from Russia and China and elsewhere, and we will work with our allies and like-minded states to ensure that the union's work stays focused on its remit. Right. So for example, you raised the question of the disclosures, and there will be proposals that will try to leverage that event in order to bring questions of national security into the ITU. And what we will say is that those are important issues to debate and discuss. The ITU is not the proper place to debate and discuss them. National security and intelligence issues are not the remit of communications ministers. This is a gathering of communications ministers whose focus is on increasing people's connectivity to communications, not on how states or individuals use those communications.
Lynn Stanton from Telecommunications Reports. You mentioned China among the regimes. Is it of concern to the U.S. that the presumptively incoming Secretary General of the ITU, since he's running unopposed, is from China?
I know Mr. Zhao personally. I've worked with him now for 2 years. He has been with the ITU as the Deputy Secretary General, and before that he was, I believe, the head of the ITU Technical Standards. He's been there for basically about 20 years. He's a professional bureaucrat in a good sense, and so we will work collaboratively with him. And again, the ITU is a membership-based organization. Its work is driven by the membership, and we will continue to work with our colleagues to make sure that work stays within the remit of the organization. Yes, ma'am.
Angelica Herrera with Voice of America. The issue of censorship, like in countries like Venezuela or Cuba, is this something that comes up in this conference, in these type of conferences, and do you expect to have any effect in those countries in the future?
I'm sorry, did you?
No, I was just going to say, I think, and then I'll let Danny give the details, but this goes back to the question that your colleague asked about where do you expect things to come from that don't like the multi-stakeholder system. And so part of what happens is that countries want to be able to legitimize their own decisions about censorship, and that's why these proposals go forward or are put forward. They don't go forward because there's not an international consensus that that's appropriate. So proposals get put forward, but there isn't consensus around them. But sorry, Danny.
No, I think that's correct. We won't grant any international stamp of approval through the ITU for censorship practices. And we won't agree to anything that would create technical standards or mechanisms by which to enable censorship. And proposals to that effect will be made, and we will have a debate about that. And we will deny consensus.
I learned from news reports that one South Korean expert is running for one of the top office, standardization bureau.
Technical standards
director
bureau.
of
Yes.
So does the United States support?
The United States doesn't make public its support or opposition for any of the candidates. There are 3 candidates, all of whom are very competent. I know the gentleman from South Korea. He's very well respected. But the United States doesn't make public declarations about support or opposition of
So
candidates.
then what do you think are the chances of his election?
I wouldn't. I haven't whipped the vote, so I'm not really sure. Yes, ma'am.
Nancy Scully from Washington Post. You may well have covered this before I got here, and I won't ask you to do it again, but is there multi-stakeholder sort of debate, does that come down to sort of one proposal, one vote, or could there be like sort of bits and pieces?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
In terms of, so the idea would be that there would be a proposal to sort of like move away from multi-stakeholder model towards the ITU.
Mhm.
Is that necessarily somebody writes one sort of omnibus sort of proposal for doing that, or could people have kind of like separate, does that make sense, sort of
Yeah.
separate proposals?
No, there's people, so there are numerous proposals that get put forward, and some of them do things by changing definitions. They're highly technical, and so it's not that there's just one proposal saying, okay, let's abandon the multi-stakeholder system and, put it all in the ITU. It's done in a, I would say, suggest a more subtle way, but that could have that same effect, but there isn't consensus, hopefully, around that, and so.
There are a number of functions that constitute internet governance. A number of those functions are executed by multi-stakeholder organizations, the most obvious of which is ICANN, which manages naming and numbering. There will be proposals to have and have been historically at the 2010 plenipotentiary, I believe. There are proposals to transfer the authority for naming and numbering of the internet from ICANN to the United Nations. So that's one example of a situation in which something that is decided through a multi-stakeholder forum would be transferred to the International Telecommunications Union. Another example is the Internet Engineering Task Force produces voluntary protocols that are constructed through a request for proposal system in a multi-stakeholder process. The ITU has a standard setting body, It's a technical standard setting body within the ITU where the standards are determined by governments. They are voluntary as well. Now, we believe that the IETF has proven itself the best and most capable mechanism for producing protocols that apply to the internet. And we would not support proposals that would purport to create internet standards through the ITU. So that's just two examples of how various multi-stakeholder processes result in outcomes that incorporate on equal footing anyone who cares about the question. Now, obviously, if you have more expertise, your voice carries greater weight, but it's in the multi-stakeholder process. One of the key prerequisites is open participation and the ability to debate on equal footing your perspectives and not have any one stakeholder, whether that be government or a specific company or a specific set of engineers or a specific set of academics, or I could go on, make the determination for everyone about what the outcome is. And you work through rough consensus, and the market decides what decisions are most valuable for participants.
So names and numbers, sorry to harp on this, but names and numbers seems kind of, that's a big picture thing. If somebody puts on the table, you're going to rally pretty aggressively against that.
Oh, yeah.
Also, the standards. Are there sort of like smaller little pieces that people could slip through that you're on watch for?
One of the things that we're on watch for is the degree to which the ITU will want to involve itself on privacy questions. So, for example, how do commercial or state actors collect, use, and distribute people's information? That's fundamentally a content issue and fully outside the remit of the ITU. There will be, because it's such a hot topic and because you have a gathering of ministers, there will be a desire to discuss and come to some form of deliberation over what proper behavior is in that space. And we will debate and discuss it. But again, it is not the proper work of this particular institution. It is a question that's being asked in multiple other fora, and governments are engaging it in multiple other fora. But we believe that the ITU should focus on its core competencies and make its contributions where it can add value. And that simply on content issues and how people use the internet, what they create on it, how they interact with each other, how they freely associate, how they freely express themselves, is not the remit of a technical standardized organization.
Joe Marks from Politico. So other than maintaining the multi-stakeholder model and limiting or halting any expansion of the ITU's powers, are there any other things that you hope to accomplish during the conference? Anything phrased in a positive way?
Sure. We want to use the convening capacity of the Development Bureau of the ITU to encourage public policies that, for example, move forward the digital transition so that there's greater use of the space in the airwaves for mobile broadband. Or, for example, encourage an understanding of the value of competition in markets for investment, and move away from the protection of specific incumbent industries or incumbent participants in a market. That encourage essentially a legal, regulatory, and policy environment that encourages global investment, and connectivity. Those are all things that we're going to work on through the development sector. And then through the radio sector is a promotion of increased access to wireless technologies and an involvement of companies in ways to ensure that you get the deployment of wireless networks at the lowest cost rate possible. And then through the standardization body to ensure that these are interconnected networks. So, for example, in Africa, we were talking about this earlier today, you'll have fiber networks that end at borders because the communications regulators between two countries aren't working well together to ensure that networks are interoperating between them. And oftentimes information will have to go to London and then come back to Kenya, even when it's in the country right next door, right? Whereas opposed to if you had the kind of collaboration, you could have intracontinental communications that you don't have today at a much lower rate, much greater efficiency, much less latency, and eventually a cheaper cost to consumers. So those are kind of the positive, obviously, all of the positive things. And we share the goal. We share the goal of connecting the world, which is the ultimate mission of the ITU. And we're going to build on that shared goal with our colleagues to get to yes on a significant number of proposals.
Lynn Stanton from Telecommunications Reports. Is there much work done on the spectrum issues at the Plenipotent?
It's generally referred to the World Radio Conference. But there will be sometimes resolutions and proposals emphasizing the importance of wireless connectivity.
Any last questions?
Can I ask one that's, might be sort of theoretical, but on this idea of moving to the UN or to the ITU, the names and numbering issues, that's really essentially ownership of a database, isn't it? I mean, the database of names and the numbers that are associated with them, what is the U.S. position on who actually owns that database now and what kind of legal claim the UN would have, or the ITU would have to lay, I mean, they can create their own database, somebody can create their own database, but there's an existing database that's in somebody's control now.
It's operated, well, it's run by ICANN and managed by ICANN, right?
But is that do you view that as a legal ownership by ICANN of the
There's-
database, or is it a community ownership, or?
I would defer these questions to the Department of Commerce generally, but the operational effectiveness of ICANN is what is our protected output, right? And the inclusion of the entire community in ensuring that those decisions are based on questions of efficiency and technical know-how, rather than politicized.
Right.
I don't know, Kathy, was there something you wanted to close with?
I would
mentioned-
just, only in closing, just reemphasize what Danny said, and that is, I think there is a positive agenda for the ITU, and there is an absolute need for the ITU in fostering connectivity, because it's incontrovertible that increased connectivity brings increased economic benefit. And so that is why we want everyone to be connected in the world, and the ITU plays a seminal role in making sure that can happen. And so that's our goal, is to make sure that they remain really strong in fostering that economic prosperity for everyone.
Ambassador, anything further?
No, ma'am.
All
Thank
right.
you all very much.
Thank you for
Appreciate it.
coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll